it's such an amazing advertisement of human resilience, of perseverance, and not just athletes, just any human being. That even when things look really bleak and really dark, and it feels like absolute crap, you actually have so much more strength within you to be able to push everything aside and carry on.
Welcome back to the Inside Edge podcast. We're here for another season, and what better way to kick it off by bringing our favourite, Ananya Pendran, back on. Welcome, Ananya.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me. I'm super excited to launch this new season.
And what I'm most excited about is the time we're recording this. We've arguably seen one of the best games of women's cricket ever. And from an Indian sport perspective, we've seen one of the best innings ever seen. And the reason we were going to do a general intro talking about the Inside Edge philosophies and whatnot, but I think what we've seen from Jemimah Rodrigues, for those that might be listening a bit delayed, she scored 120 odd not out in a chasing over 330 against the best team in the world. And her press conference after that is actually unbelievable. And when I was listening to it, I was like, this encapsulates pretty much everything that Inside Edge is talking about and what we're both trying to get out to the world. It was about resilience. It was about stillness, surrender, not about technical, tactical, physical. Like, it was a different level altogether. And I think there's just so many lessons throughout that, how she spoke about it and what we saw as fans. And would love to spend today unpacking that, really. I'm going to throw it straight to you, Ananya. What were some of your initial reflections from what you saw during the week?
I think the first thing that kind of comes to my mind when I think of that innings, and then of course everything that happened after that, her post-match interview, her press conference, is just the vulnerability and the outpouring of emotion. I think she mentioned it as well, that very few athletes like to, or very few people like to, are willing to share or talk about weakness, as we call it. And I think I spoke about it a lot as well, about how we have this vision of champions being stoic and solid and always looking strong. But I think the thing that stood out about the entire, or actually the 24 hours post Jemmy's innings and her press conference, is just that people have started to understand that there's strength in vulnerability. I think that's what really, really stood out. And then, I mean, there's so many things that she said through that press conference, whether it was, like you said, about stillness, about, just accepting or riding the waves almost. But also for me, different things about mental health, anxiety, and how she dealt with all that, but also the belief that has grown within herself, but also within that Indian team, and just kind of how that's hopefully shifting women's sport in India. Those are, yeah, I think the top three things that I could think about were just the vulnerability, the strength she found in it, and just her willingness and that ability to be still and grounded when there's so much pressure.
Yeah, and those three are pretty much the pillars of what I'd love to talk about today. I think if we start with the vulnerability piece, I know the queen of vulnerability in Brene Brown talks about that there is no such thing as courage without vulnerability. So, you just can't be courageous if you're not vulnerable in the first place, right? And I'd love to touch on some of these vulnerabilities in terms of the noise that was around Jemimah Rodrigues at this point, in that there's a lot of internal noise, there's a lot of external noise. We're talking from an external point of view, the obvious, there's 40 odd thousand in the stadium. You've got however much noise from social media around the world. There's millions, probably billions watching this game. And then the internal noise, from my perspective, all root from one concept, which is, we've spoken about a fair bit before, is that the gift of desire, which is also a curse. So when you want something so badly, your heart and soul, and I personally believe you're born with this. I don't think this is something that you can build, in a sense. Like, a lot of the best athletes, business people, they're born with this gift of desire. But it's also a curse, because when, yes, it drives you to work your butt off, but when things aren't going right, you tip right over into anxiety. Now, she said she'd been crying every single day of the World Cup. She'd been calling her mum and just bursting out crying and crying and crying. She's had to lean on her friends within the team, which I know you know quite well in terms of Arundhati Reddy, there was Smriti, Harleen, I think, as well. Um, and this is not, as you say, the stoicism side of things. This is, we see athletes as strong and brave, and a lot of classical sports psychology talks about the importance of confidence and being like mentally ready and you're up and about and being positive, but that wasn't reality. And I know you're embedded in the Indian ecosystem. What do you see as like the contributing factors to some of this noise?
I think the first would be the thing you talked about, that gift and that curse of desire. Just wanting so badly to do well and to prove a point and to prove that you're there. And I think with Jemimah, she spoke about it as well. But the fact that she was dropped from the 2022 World Cup, she didn't make that squad when everyone thought she would. She wasn't even in the five reserves that traveled with the team. And she'd been an integral part of that Indian team for the previous 3.5 years, batted at number three, and everyone thought that she would make it, but she didn't make the squad. And I think for her, that was a big turning point in her career where she obviously took a bit of a break and only played hockey, didn't play too much cricket, and then of course came back and smashed it at domestic cricket, and then came back into the Indian team and almost reinvented herself. But she spoke about the fact that obviously when she came into this World Cup, she had come in as India's premier middle order batter. She had reinvented herself at number five and had made that position her own. Had scored a truckload of runs, scored her maiden 100, and everything was going well for her. Everyone spoke about her being a very crucial cog in that Indian batting lineup should they have to, I guess, get close to winning. And so it almost felt like the stars were aligning for her. But she walks into the tournament, gets a duck in her first game. Uh, Again, I think she got off to a start, didn't get off to the best. Like she didn't get too many runs under her belt in those first few games. And suddenly there was scrutiny, there was pressure. From the outside looking in, you were obviously like, India can't drop her. They shouldn't drop her. But obviously within the squad, there was a lot happening. She got dropped from the 11, and she still felt like she was having to prove a point. And obviously she came into the World Cup with a bit of baggage of wanting to make this World Cup her own because the previous edition wasn't, she wasn't there. And this deep desire to almost put a stamp on the tournament and say, I am here, I am a match winner, and this is my stage because this is my format. Um, she was almost like, I think, clutching at straws, like trying to find a way to make a statement. And then I think getting dropped, of course, would have had a big impact on her. And again, having to prove herself. She got out, I think, 3 innings in a row to left arm spin, but playing the sweep shot. And the sweep shot is her favorite shot. I'm sure, knowing the way India works, she would have been told off for having played that sweep shot. She would have been told off for, don't play it. And that is her scoring shot. So there was so much happening. And yeah, I think just that deep desire to want to do well. But she came out in the press conference and said that I walked out today in the game again in the semifinal, not thinking that I needed to score 50, that I needed to score 100, and not thinking that I needed to prove someone wrong. um, and just letting go. And I think the fact that she realized, she said that I don't do well when I walk out wanting to prove people wrong. And I think just that realization of maybe that's not what fuels me is massive, because a lot of athletes think that, they feel like motivation comes from I'm motivated because I want to prove you wrong. And that was something that fueled me for a really long time. Every time someone told me that, you're not good enough, for me it was, I'm going to show you. But a lot of times it doesn't work. We're you're doing it for yourself at the end of the day. You're doing it for the people you care about, for your teammates, and to seek inspiration from other people and to realize what your, why you're doing what you're doing, which is the central question that you ask a lot. I think realizing that is massive, and the fact that she realized that her motivation wasn't to prove to people that she can bat at number three. It was actually to win games for her team and to win a trophy for India. That's massive. So just to go back to your question of what the contributing factors are of the internal and external pressure, it obviously starts with the desire, but then there are cultural aspects of it. There are just so many people breathing down your neck. There's the expectation because she is she was or she is one of India's premier batters. She is a face that you see in a lot of advertisements. She is one of the faces of the WPL. She was in the WBBL, so she's a name that everyone knows. Her social media personality is out there for everyone to see. There are also a lot of critics who are saying, why is she so active on social media, and why is she, loud and proud, and she should be focusing on her cricket. There's so many different aspects to it, and I think 2022 allowed her to almost embrace who she was as a person and say, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to play my cricket, I'm going to enjoy myself, and if you don't like it, that's your problem, but I'm enjoying myself and I'm doing well, I'm winning games for the country. Um, so for her to embrace that, and also now say, I've found a different source of motivation, which is the people around me. Um, I think that's massive. And, there's so many different things to it. I know I've gone around and around in circles, and I'm not sure I answered your question, but yes.
No, that's brilliant. Like, there is so much. We could do a whole podcast series just on what you just said, because it encapsulates the pressures, right, and the noise. So that it's multidimensional. There's cultural. There's an internal factor from having the gift of desire, where you want to do well. And the thing is, everyone's human. So, and we've got that negative bias. Like, if we want to strip away all the concepts, if you like, and look purely at your brain's negatively biased, and it's biased towards detecting any threats. And what you mentioned there, I loved, was around identity. So Jemmy's identity is around being a cricketer, right? Which is normal, and I think that's fine, providing it's not the only thing, right? And then I think 2022, that's where, if it is your only thing, you're in trouble, because if you're not a cricketer, then who are you, right? But then it sounds like the journey, which I know you're quite close to us, so you've seen that unfold, where the journey has not been about developing a sweep shot. The journey has not been about learning how to play over cover. The journey has been about discovering who she is, right? And that's a big question, but a big part of that comes back to, and this is the inside edge, is understanding I'm not the person that plays to prove people wrong. I'm not the person that plays 50s, 100s. Of course, it's nice to get 50s. Of course, it's nice to get 100s. Like, no shit, right? But the real next level is about understanding. And how do you get into that flow state? Well, you've got to be playing in a way that's aligned to what is most authentic at a spiritual level, almost. So if we look at body, mind, spirit, the body is the one that's physically trained. The mind is also the one that's trained. The mind can focus what's important now. It can get distracted, but the spirit is almost what the mind and the body is not. So if you strip those two away, what's left? And for Jemimah Rodrigues, a lot of that is around, oh, I want to win games of cricket for my team. Like, that is what gets me out of bed in the morning. That is, like, the opportunity to win for my team is me at my best. So that then informs what the mind focuses on. And as an example, if you're, this happens to me all the time, you face a few dot balls, especially early, like she was 4 off 11 balls, right? Chasing 330. It's easy to go, oh no, I've been dropped out of this team. I'm the first batter out. 4 off 11. It's a World Cup semi-final against Australia. We have to score upwards of 7 runs and over to panic. Like, the normal response there, the mind would almost go, I need to play a big shot here. I need to look good to others. And then the body responds. The body responds to that anxiety by tensing up. And all of a sudden your flow's gone. But if the spirit is like, yeah, I'm 4 of 11, but we're 1 wicket down. I'm going to be here at the end, which she spoke about. That was her thing. It's like, I'm here at the end. I don't care what I'm on. I will be here at the end, and I'm winning this for the team. Now the mind is focused on what's important now, which is the next ball. And now the body responds accordingly. So, like, it actually starts with that base of who are you, is how you're playing aligned with that. And if you start with that, it is so strong. And this is the main point. Like, it is so strong that all the noise we spoke about, she's suffering from anxiety, right? Like, she said she was numb. She's crying every day. She is not in a good place. Yet she was able to get it done. And from my perspective anyway, I think a huge part of that was because she led with spirit rather than what you should do. I don't know if any of that, like, anything there stand out for you?
No, I think that that definitely makes a lot of sense. And she talks a lot about prayer. And um, that's kind of what keeps her grounded and in the moment almost. And you talk about being in the present, and that's what keeps her in the present. It's focusing on the words of from the Bible or whatever she is mumbling to herself. But that is kind of her routine that keeps her in the present and keeps her focused on what she has to do next. And I think the other thing that stands out to me, I just watched the innings again this morning, but the other thing that stood out to me is, yes, there was noise around, oh, she got out to the sweep shot, oh, she got out to left arm spin, and all those thoughts could have been in her head. But not just the innings against Australia, but the previous game that they played against, not Bangladesh, but New Zealand, when she walked in at number 3 for the first time, was she went to the sweep shot early. It was the game after she'd been dropped. She went to the sweep shot early. She went to the ramp shot early. She moved around the crease. She did everything that was almost characteristically Jemimah Rodrigues. And it was the same against Australia. You said she was 4 off 11. And her next scoring shot was a ramp pass fine leg for 4. And those are just typically Jemimah Rodrigues things that she does when she's in control and when she feels present and calm. And those are not things she does under pressure. So that's another thing that really, really stood out to me was, yes, there must have been all these things, but her ability to block all that out and just stay true to herself and play her way, despite what people could have been saying, of course, with her best interests at heart. But she said, well, this is how I succeed. This is my way. This is how I play to my strengths, and this is how I'm going to get the job done. And she just did that. And how did she do that? Was by keeping herself grounded. How did she keep herself grounded? By kind of through prayer or whatever it is, but almost feeding her the spiritual side of it, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd love to actually go on to how she did all this, right? Because I bet everyone listening at some point has been in that place, probably more often than not, to be fair, where the noise is taking over. And we're talking, the reason, again, I know I've said it before, but why I have not been able to stop thinking about this innings for like 3 days is because of the amount of noise. Like, day to day, pretty much every game of cricket ever played, everyone experiences some sort of noise and distraction. But this is beyond anything. Like, she had every reason to break. Every reason. Off the field, on the field, external, internal. Yet she was able to find a way, as you say, to be present. And she had her routines, which she was mumbling away, as you say, to keep her present. But I think there's a lot more to it. And if we zoom out for a second, how was she able to get to the point where she stayed present? And that's where upon reflection and listening to what she said, I kind of came up with 4 main themes anyway. One was support and how people supported her. It wasn't just, okay, you've got anxiety, go see a sports psychologist and they'll fix you, which is usually the method. And that sports psychologist usually goes, oh, you need to visualize, have a mental routine, don't think bad thoughts, focus on the process, be present. And it's like, that's just not enough, It's not enough. So one pillar for me was support and how those people supported her. Another was this concept of stillness. And I'm combining that with surrender. So I do want to touch on, she's obviously religious and spoke a lot about how Jesus, in her case, helped her. And we're not going to take this down necessarily a religious route, but acknowledging a higher power is super important. And there's actually pretty good research around this. And I think stillness and surrender come together, which we'll get to. The third one for me was purpose, which we've kind of already spoken about, in that her purpose was bigger than herself. It wasn't about her 100. There was a bigger purpose to it. And the fourth for me is the right intent. So she said, like, I know I got a few chances, but I felt God scripted everything. The main bit, I believe if you do the right things with the right intentions, he always blesses. So again, it doesn't have to be religion based, but it's do the right things with the right intent. Things will work out in the end. So those are kind of the four pillars. I'd love to get to, since we've already spoken about it already, the stillness aspect. Now, for me, the one quote that stood out for me is just stand still and God will fight for you. Now, the reason that stood out for me because I've actually written this down in different ways and heard it. No joke, the last month or two, it keeps coming up. So different versions. There's a book. This is for those that are so anti-religion and a bit more on the Stoic philosophy side of things. Ryan Halliday has written something which is called the entire book called "Stillness is the Key." That's the name of his book, and it's a full book. George Mumford, who is a world class, he's written the book The Mindful Athlete. He's worked with Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, like superstars. And one of them, he's got 5 main pillars. One of them is be still and know. And the last one was actually what I heard in a guided meditation, if you like. And he said that the greatest performances come from the quietest places. So, like, there's a common theme across the board from religion to Stoicism to hard science, like this concept of stillness. Now, I'm not sure I have a specific question for you, but my main thing that I do want to talk about is so often from a coaching point of view and an environment that we create, how much of it in your experience, okay, I do have a question for you. In India, and it's definitely happens in Australia too, but I'd love to know in India, how much of coaching and or mentoring talks about the importance of stillness compared to potentially adding more noise?
Ooh, interesting question. I'm not sure I have an answer, but I feel like every time, um, from personal experience, every time I hit a bump or every time I felt out of control or every time I felt like um I was grasping or I was so in search of something, I was always given more information and therefore confused a lot more and therefore like more noise was almost added to the chaos in my head uh and I almost found myself searching for more for clarity and I couldn't find it because people were just adding more like advice or trying to push me in another direction or rather than just saying sit where you are and allow things to allow your mind to almost settle down and then go from there. And I think it was only much later in my career that through all this almost trial and error that I kind of found that ability to just allow everything to almost wash over me and just sit there. Whether it was emotion, whether it was thoughts, whether it was, anything else that I found that in the last couple of years of my career that I found a way to ride the waves by just almost being still. And that is the hardest thing to do. Um, but yeah, I think I don't think we quite understand that concept of being still yet, especially from a coaching point of view, because I think I found that coaches almost it's- feel like if they're not saying things or adding something or giving you advice that they're not doing their job. Um, rather than I think what Jemmy spoke about was the support she received where people just turned up. Um, they just showed up and maybe didn't say anything, but they just listened. And a lot of the time when you're in those periods, you need to untangle your thoughts or your emotions or whatever it is yourself. And the minute someone's almost adding advice and other things, they, like you can't untangle what you're feeling. Um, so I think from a coach or from a mentor point of view, a lot of the time I've experienced that people feel like they're being useless if they're not actually adding something. And I think without realizing, I think the people around Jemmy allowed her to find that stillness just by being there. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that speaks perfectly to the support pillar that we spoke about and what is it that they did. And one thing I know my boss actually, who is a genius in this space, Sarah, he talks about there's three things that people need from you when they are in a bad place. And you need to work that out really quickly. So that's the coaching and mentoring piece is, do they need a hug? Do they need an ear? So just to be listened to, or do they actually want advice? And it's really important to discern. And I think, as you say, like it's not to say that you should never give advice. Like that's not what we're saying here. It's understanding what people need when. And different people will offer different things. For example, if Jamie did keep getting out to a sweep shot, she might go to a coach and go, "Hey, is there something technically I'm doing, or was it just the wrong ball?" And you can have a quick decision. The last thing she would need when she's anxious is someone going, "No, don't play that shot." You know, like that's the art, I think, of coaching and mentoring. But like from my experience, even in Australia, like it's human nature to help. Like it doesn't come from a bad intent. You want to help. You want to give advice. You want to make people feel better. But I think this is a skill set in itself is to really understand. And more often than not, especially at an elite level, I'd almost go to say if I had to guess as a percentage, 80-90% of the time, they need a hug or an ear. And that's it. Like we don't need to add more, even if you are the coach and you've got the expertise, because we know that the performance and the flow will come if they're in a good place to start with. Like the doing comes from the being. And that, like from my perspective, the entire job of a coach is to get your players to be in the best possible place to give them a chance to succeed. Now, how do you do that? Often we go more analysis, more discussion, more meetings, let's throw more balls, let's hit more balls. Whereas, which all important, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I think there's the art and the best, from my experience anyway, get you to a place of peace and stillness. And the best way to do that is to sit and listen, have a laugh, play. You've got to understand who are they at their best. Like by understanding Jemmy's at her best when it's team-based, well, let's focus on team-based. She might be best when she's got that bit of buzz about her and the playfulness. Let's be playful. Being playful and maybe mucking around in a warm-up game is more important than actually hitting balls in that case, right? So there's no easy answer here, but like from the support pillar, I think like you nailed it. She had people, by the sounds of it, that just sat with her and listened. And I know you know Arundhati Reddy as well. Can you speak to a bit how their relationship likely really supported, how they supported each other, really?
I think it's a really interesting one, because when I mean, of course, I know they're very good friends, and it's very obvious if you follow them on social media, they're always together. Um, but this is one player hasn't featured in the 11 at all. Like she's the only one in the 15 who has not played a single game in this World Cup, and will likely not play the final either, right? But I think it's so important to acknowledge that her biggest contribution in this World Cup could probably just be keeping her team or her teammates in the best space possible, and that is so big. Those are the little things we don't realize. But I think with them, it's also just understanding each other. They've got such a siblingy relationship almost, where Jemmy's like the younger sister, who I think she understands when she needs a bit of a talking to, because she does give her those as well, or when she just needs to just sit with her and allow her to be. or when to be playful and all that. So I think she is, her EQ, as we call it, is quite high. She's very good at reading and understanding people and situations and figuring out whether they need a hug or an ear or some advice. But I think that way, she's kind of a really sensible and, well, not sensible, but very intelligent when it comes to reading human emotion and understanding people and their requirements, and of course understanding Jemmy and her patterns as well. Being around each other for the last 7, 8 years, of course, will help with that. But I think they're also quite similar personalities where they like to enjoy themselves. They play their best when they're when they're happy and when they're just doing their thing. Of course, Arundhati on the field is far more aggressive and shows it that way. But I think when they're just kind of relaxed and focused on what the team needs, they both have very similar mindsets that way. So um, yeah, and I think it's quite like what's even more interesting for me is what mental state must Arundhati be in to know that she's, not featuring in the biggest tournament of her life at home. Um, whatever her mental state is to still turn up for a friend. Um, I mean, that's quite something. To be able to put your own needs aside sometimes when your friends are around, and if that's simply to turn up. And of course, I'm sure Jemmy's doing the same for her. But just it's almost just having or leaving space for someone to be, where you can be yourselves together and almost recharge together without saying anything to each other, and you understand what the other's needs are. Um, yeah, it's very siblingy relationship. And I think those are, especially in long tournaments or in teams, those are the kind of relationships that set you up for success. When you're there, they also keep you sane during long tournaments, where you can't go out, where if you step out of the hotel, there'll be 100 people asking for selfies or something like that. It's not a place where you can just walk around and sit in a cafe like they would potentially if they were outside the country. So just the scrutiny is massive if you step outside your hotel. So just to have, I guess, a safe space um, with the people around you is of course very important.
Yeah, it kind of takes you back to the stillness piece again. It allows her the opportunity to get into that still space. Um, and side quest, one of my 4 things based on that is what I've seen. This is externally. I reckon you've seen a lot more than I have. Is that this Indian team seems very united and in a great space. Like, and there's tiny things that I've seen. The games get quite late here, so I don't get to watch all of them. But in the huddle before that game, there was a young girl actually giving the team a rubber, right? And I'm like, how good is this? Like, they're not going to the traditional be serious, or I'm going to give you a hype. The captain speaks, authority speaks first. And they had a young girl and everyone was smiling and laughing. And I saw that and I was like, oh, I want to hear, like, I think they might. I think they might actually get up. And then Phoebe Litchfield scored 100. Women scored 100. I was like, maybe I was wrong. But that was one thing. And then little bits and pieces of footage that they've shared of the dressing room and how much the girls get around each other. And to reiterate what you've just said, Arundhati Reddy's contribution has been right up there in terms of team success. Like how I had that experience. So one year I was at the Melbourne Stars, I did not play a single game, and we were a similar concept where we were in the hub, we were in a hotel, we could not go outside. It didn't have all the other crowds and expectation and all that, but it was horrible. Like I really, really struggled, and it's hard to stop your mind. Like I'll be honest, it's hard to stop your mind going, gee, if they don't have a good game today, I might be a chance. Or if you go to the coach, thinking about the coach, I remember I had a meeting with Meg Lanning and I asked her to have a chat. And I was like, what do I need to do? And she was honest. She was just like, we had the best team on paper in that tournament. 9 of our 11 had played international cricket. Like, I'm just, unless there's a serious number of injuries, I'm just not going to play. Like, but I hated it, right? And you do get around your team and definitely was happy for team success, but nowhere near was I able to get to Arundhati Reddy levels of energy. It is so impressive, and I think it speaks to a lot of things that they have to be doing right in that unit. I don't know if you have more of an insight than I do from a team culture point of view.
I mean, I think as a group that they are obviously very, very united. They're all pulling for the same thing. And I think they've had enough of being second best almost. And funnily enough, there are also a group of younger players who come in who don't have those scars. Like Sri Charani in the semi-final was our best bowler by far. She didn't have the scars of losing to Australia in knockout games. And she was, I think, crucial in pulling back the score. I think at one point, it looked like Australia would get 380. And her spell, and just her ability to be like, okay, this is the line I have to bowl, and this is all I'm gonna do. If you can hit me off this length, then hit me off this length, but this is what I'm gonna do. And even when she got hit, it didn't look like she was phased. She was like, I'm gonna come back and do what I have to do. So I think just the fact that a lot of them are of similar age, they've grown up together almost. Like Harman and maybe Snehrana aside, they're all largely very similar ages. They all, I think it's a great atmosphere. They're pulling for the same thing. I think Jemmy, again mentioned, I don't know whether it was in a dressing room chat or in the press conference, but talked about how each person, like when she was fatigued and when she felt like she was making really poor decisions, she lent on her partners to talk her through. Like even though she was the set batter, because she felt like she was so mentally fatigued, she lent on Deepthi and Richa and Amanjot to rev her up. She fed off their energy. And just again, that ability to be able to lean on your teammates at a time where there's a lot of pressure, but also to trust them, to be able to pull you through. Not just their ability, but trust that they have the best intentions for you. Obviously, everyone wants to win for India, but you know, just I think that again, that vulnerability between teammates is also massive. It's a very different like having grown up in India, it's not necessarily something that we've seen previously. Um, of people just being willing to feed off each other. Like for example, Deepti Sharma getting run out at such a crucial point. Um, Maybe 8 to 10 years ago, we would have seen a really angry batter walking off saying, how could you do that to me? But she walked around and said, okay, finish it. Like, I trust you to be able to finish it. So finish it. And it was I want you to do this. Like, I'm giving you the energy I have, take it and finish it. And I think there's this empathy and this genuine care within that group where they want to succeed together. They're happy when other people succeed. You saw, when Pratika Rawal was ruled out, you could see that people were devastated for her. But when Shafali came in, they just like embraced her and said, "Okay, do it for Pratika." And now everyone's like, the tournament started off with we want to do it for Harman, but now it's we want to win it for Pratika. We want to win it for each other. And they're all pulling for the same thing. I think it's a it's obviously a good environment. It's a good place to be, but I think it's very player driven. I think they've had enough of being second best. And you mentioned the kid, the little girl who gave them a rev up before they walked in. I think ICC shared a video this morning, and she basically walked in and said, "Australia are a good team, but I think you're a better team." And
That's so great.
that's how they walked on the field. So I think, yeah, they just want to enjoy themselves. They have faith in their ability, and I think they have faith in each other's ability. But they're also willing to feed off each other and give everyone else an opportunity to shine within that group. So
Yeah, it's such a good point, and something that, like, I've used this analogy so much over the last few weeks, but it's if you had the pond and the fish kept dying, would you treat in each individual fish, or would you treat the water? and it's normally the water, right? And that's where the cultural element comes into it. And you and I both bang our head against brick walls trying to convince people of the importance of some of the themes you just mentioned, like empathy and the vulnerability with each other, actually supporting each other. And that example you gave of Deepti Sharma is such a great one. Like, most people, you get run out, you're upset. And her immediate response, it's not like she thought, oh, I should actually go to Jemmy and say something. It was just organic, right? And those behaviors come from fixing the pond, if you like, right? And there may not have been a real intention to fix a pond, if you like, but as I think it's more organic. The players have decided certain things. They've worked together. They've been vulnerable with each other, and therefore, once they're out on the field, they're able to actually get through. And I think that brings us back to that purpose, right? Like, there's so much to this. Ultimately, like, the end point we're trying to get to is to get each individual player to be the very best version of themselves, one ball at a time. That's the end point. If you do that, you're going to win more often than not. What leads into that? There's a lot, right? Like, we've covered, there's a team culture aspect to it. There's support from each individual in their own, I call it their square squad, which we use with a lot of our athletes, but developing their own square squad of support and leaning on them in times. We've spoken about this idea of stillness. And how do you get to stillness? Well, you need to get all the noise out, and we need to actually accept that, yeah, I am scared. This is hard. I am anxious. There is noise. It is a World Cup semi-final. Like, ignoring that and just going straight to, oh, watch the ball, it's not going to work, right? You have to be vulnerable and acknowledge that this is hard. I need help. And by sitting in that, you can then actually access stillness. It sounds counterintuitive, but like you mentioned trust in there. And for me, your capacity to be still is actually a measure of how much you trust yourself. Because if you can, if you're the classic, oh, I can't, like, the most common question that I get anyway is, how do I stop overthinking? And it's like, you're not overthinking, you're just thinking, and that's fine. But the reason you're thinking a lot is probably because there's an underlying level of trust. Whereas if you trust your skill sets, you can be quiet and let your natural reactions take over. And that's physically and mentally. Right. So when I mean by mentally, like Jemmy's also said in one of her press conferences, like I think it was Harmanpreet Kaur who said this. Jemmy is very analytical, and she will tell you every over, we got 7 off that. Oh, there's 2 balls left. We've got 5 off that over. So she is thinking. It's not that she's not thinking, but she's thinking correctly, and that's organic. That's from experience, and that organic thinking comes from stillness. So you know what to do when, and you're present. Whereas overthinking is, oh, I'm 4 off 11. Or should I play a sweep? Should I not play a sweep? That's from when you don't trust yourself. So that I just wanted to make sure that we distinguish. I'm not saying go out there and just blank mind. It's not blank mind. It's actually thinking correctly. And the way to think correctly, if you be still, and if we can use all the support and the environment and your preparation, etc., to be still, then organically, physically, you will respond with flow state, with balance. You'll respond exactly how you've trained. And mentally, you'll also respond based on the experience that you've had. Both of those start from that level of stillness, if you like. And the good thing is you can actually train stillness too. Like, it's not some esoteric thing. Like, we can get into this in maybe another episode, but the stillness is something you can train. And I think the one thing we haven't quite got to yet, which before we finish off I really do want to get to, is this aspect of, yes, be still, be locked in the moment, but then you need to let go. And letting go is something that it's very difficult to actually do. Like, how many times do coaches say, trust yourself or back yourself, believe in yourself, or focus on what you can control and let go of what you can't? That's really, really hard. Really hard. And from my experience anyway, I don't know if you have anything different, but it seems like one of the only ways to actually be able to let go is to hand the outcome over to something greater than yourself. Some people go to luck. Some people go to God, or like religion. I like to use Mother Cricket, which I do believe, like, there's a universe the universe is a common one too. But mother cricket, it's like things even out. I'm going to get dropped 3 times in one game. I'll get a stinker of a decision in the next. And trusting, again, there's no hard science behind this, but it's and there might be actually. It's if I bring the right intent, so if I work really hard, my intention is for the team and to be a good person, and I do my best, then mother cricket will take care of the rest, and I'm going to win in the long run. That's kind of the mentality, and it sounds like Jemmy had that as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this whole concept of how do we let go.
It's interesting you mentioned mother cricket because the other day I think Smriti Mandana was talking about I believe in this cricket god and I so I think it was after the 2023 T20 World Cup where again they lost to Australia by 5 runs, were cruising, imploded at the end. And she said, I don't know if it was after that or if it was after the Commonwealth Games, but one of those many losses to Australia that we have suffered over the last 8 years. She said that I believe in this cricket god, and I asked this cricket god, why is it that we keep faltering? Like there has to be a reason. And then she looked at herself and she was like, okay, maybe these are the things that I have to do to make sure that next time we cross the line. And again, she said that if I do this with the right intention, I believe that this cricket god will make sure that we get over the line and that eventually things fall in place. And this whole concept of surrendering and just letting go. You know how cricketers or many athletes talk about trusting the process. Um, Trusting the process, I think, is essentially letting go. Is almost just trusting the fact that you've done the work, that you've trained mentally, physically, like you've trained your instincts as well as you possibly could, and then you just go out there and react. Everyone says it. How many people do it is questionable. Um, but yeah, I feel like trusting the process also comes with embracing your strengths and embracing who you are, embracing your identity essentially. And one of the things, again, that stood out to me, one of the many things that stood out to me in that press conference, was Jemmy talking about um, I knew if I stayed that I would get things done, but by staying, she meant that I knew I run well between the wickets. I am very good at hitting the gaps. I hit, very different parts of the field. And I can access different parts of the field depending on the field. So I'm very good at playing the field almost. And she embraced that fact about her. She embraced the fact that she didn't always have to look good doing it. It didn't have to be the perfect cover drive with her elbow high. She could fall on the ground and play a lap shot. And if it went for 4 runs, it still counted. But just embracing your style almost. Um, and it just has to be effective. It doesn't have to look the best. So I think just how you do that, I don't know, but I think of course it comes from trust. It comes from being very well prepared, doing all the, you know, doing all the right training and all the rest of it, but also embracing your own style, your own identity. It doesn't have to look like anyone else or be like anyone else. But if it gets the job done, it gets the job done. And I think that's kind of why Jemimah Rodrigues has hit a point in her career where she is in control, where she knows she can get the job done simply because she's now allowed herself to be herself. Um,
Mm.
and that comes with letting go almost.
That's so good. That's so good. That is the process, right? So like understanding who you are, understanding how you play, that that right there is the process. So when people say, I actually asked this a couple of weeks ago. So I was facilitating a session down at a cricket club, and some very experienced coaches in the room, and I asked them, and 40 players. And I asked the coaches in front of everyone, I said, how often do you guys say trust the process? And they looked up and they were like, yeah, all the time. Like, as if it was a player's fault, they don't follow it. And then I asked them after, I said, I probably shouldn't have done it in front of all the players, but it worked beautifully. And I said, what is the process? So can you define when you say that, what is the process? And they couldn't give me a clear answer besides one ball at a time and watching the ball were probably the two things they came up with. And yeah, true, but I think there's a bit more depth to it, as you say. Because I could go one ball at a time and watch the ball and try hit every bowler over the top when that's clearly not a strength. Like I'm similar dimensions to Jemmy, play in a similar way, just not as good. But like it's there's a bit more depth to it. There's understanding. You said you don't know how to get there, but if you almost look at it as which we'll unpack this heaps more in upcoming podcasts, but it's like a yin and a yang in terms of the yin is you've got to be prepared. You've got to be physically fit enough. Like she must be outrageously fit, 75% humidity. She's fielded for 50 overs. She's essentially batted for 50 overs at the end of a tournament. Like we haven't even touched on how physically fit she must be. So like you've got to be fit, you've got to be prepared, you've got to have the skill set to hit all around the ground. That's like the yin, if you like. So doing the work, there's no hiding from that. The yang is now that you've done the work, how do we focus on what matters in the moment and how do we let go of the noise that is going to come? Because the way our brain is wired, as I mentioned before, we're negatively biased. We have a network in our brain, the default mode network. It is the default, hence the name. Our default is for our mind to wander. And it takes a lot of energy to be in a different network, which is called the direct experience network. We'll go into this much later as well, which allows you to focus on what's in the moment. But that takes energy, right? And that's a lot easier to access if part of your preparation in the yin is who are you? What is it like when you play at your best? Now, there's going to be noise and you're going to be very stressed, so it means you're going to have to look after your mental health. How do you do that? There's things you can do individually, but most importantly, the number one thing is having a really good support network. That includes family, that includes coaches, that includes mentors, which I know you're going to be one of the best mentors. You already are one of the best mentors that are out there in terms of helping players through these periods because like you can't do it by yourself. If that's one thing we've learned today, we started out talking about Jemimah Rodrigues and we've ended up talking about everything around her, right? You can't do it by yourself. And that's where I think that is part of preparation. And this is like a blueprint almost that you can follow. It doesn't mean you're going to succeed every time. Like Jemimah Rodrigues is going to be starting on 0 and she could end on 0 tomorrow. Like that's the reality of the game. But in the long run, Mother Cricket or the cricket gods or Jesus or whoever you want to believe in, it's going to take care of itself. It will. And if it doesn't, well, what else do you have? You know, like what else do you have? Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wind up?
No, I feel like we've covered most things that I have quickly jotted down in in my book. But I think the one thing that I did write about was so India have had this habit, and Jemmy's been through it, but India have had this habit over the last 8 years when they've been losing to Australia in knockout games, is the minute they lose a settled batter, um, they've they've gone on to collapse. A lot of the time that batter has been Harmanpreet Kaur, and a lot of the time Jemmy and Harmanpreet Kaur have had very big partnerships. Harman has gotten out, then Jemmy's gotten out, and then um, so again within that innings, when she lost Harman, almost to have to on the go deal with that PTSD almost of oh crap, could this happen again? Um, I was actually quite amazed by that. Just that ability to not go down. Like it would have been so easy to go down a whole way, so used to um losing and faltering at that point. And I was having this conversation a few weeks ago with a friend about how I learned very late in my career that winning is actually very hard work. You don't just show up and win. And I learned this the hard way where I was in the middle of an innings where we were 26 for 6 chasing 72. We needed 54 off 5 overs. It would have been very easy, like in my head, because I was so tired, because it was very hot. We'd fielded, um, and I was running all over the place. I was very tired. But Gohar Sultana was there. Um, and I actually fed off her because she was the one who was pushing me through. And of the 54, we got to a point where we needed, I think, 16 off 2 overs. And I was so tired. I just said, you know what? I want to get out. Like someone else can come in and do the job. I need to get like I'm on the verge of throwing up. Um, but again, she was like, no, just one ball, get through this one ball, get through this one ball. And it was only at the time after the game we somehow found a way to win. But it was only after that game that I realized, crap, winning is such like it's such hard work. The easy option is to lose. The easy option is to give up. And I don't think as viewers we realize how hard winning actually is, especially in those moments. Yeah, and the ire that athletes get when they don't win, is massive without realizing, damn, like most people wouldn't put themselves through that. Um, so yeah, I know I've gone off track, but the fact that Jemmy was able to deal with that PTSD, which she did mention in the press conference about, I had to almost refocus and tell myself, shove that out and just stay in the moment and surrender. I think that itself is massive. So the fact that someone who was in such a bad mental state was able to find so much mental strength, um, to be able to carry her team over the line, um, I think it's such an amazing advertisement of human resilience, of perseverance, and not just athletes, just any human being that even when things look really bleak and really dark, and it feels like absolute crap, you actually have so much more strength within you to be able to push everything aside and carry on.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to wind that up. Couldn't have said it better myself. The only things I will add on are more broadly speaking. This is the first of a new series of episodes. Some will be just me interviewing some people in and around Australia. Others will get you back on. And on top of that, within the Inside Edge we'll be offering a lot more services in terms of coaching, some online courses and experiences, etc. But we'd love any listeners to jump on board and essentially helping build the capacity in people, in coaches and players, to do what you just did. Because as we've spoken over the last hour, it doesn't happen by accident. And it's a lot more complex than just doing some visualization and meditation and having a pre-ball routine. All important things, but that's not everything. So thank you again, Nanya. It's been awesome. I'm super excited for the next few months as we roll things out. And we'll see you out in Australia for the test match.
Yep. See you then. Thank you.